Live activities. You've probably already interacted with live activities before. If you had an Uber to come over here, or if you had food delivered yesterday, for instance. But you probably thought of them as auto-updating notifications. But they're actually much more powerful than that. I like to think of them as tiny, short-lived little apps that live throughout the entire Apple ecosystem. So to get started with live activities, it's fairly simple. First thing you need to know is iOS 16 Plus, which is kind of a good thing because most of us don't live in a dream world where we can use the newest and shiniest APIs as soon as they drop. Some features are still evolving, so of course some might be gatekept by iOS versions there. We're going to use two frameworks today. The first one is ActivityKit in order to manage the life cycle of the activity. And the second one is WidgetKit to manage the UI of the activity. So first, you'll need to set up your project. It's fairly simple. You simply tell that you support live activities into your info.py list. You add the push notification capability to your project, even if you don't require any other kind of push notification. And you add a widget extension target. If you already have one for home screen widget, you can reuse it, obviously. Then ActivityKit to manage the lifecycle of your activity. The first thing you'll need to do is define the data model of your activity. It's simply a struct that conforms to the activity attribute protocol, and it contains two things: some static data that will never change, and some content state that can actually be updated as much as you want throughout the lifecycle of the activity. This needs to be accessible by both the app and your widget extension. So you can use a local package, you can use a framework, you can go crazy and simply add the same file to both targets. You do whatever you want. So then you can start an activity locally when your app is in the foreground, if the user taps on a button, for instance. It's fairly straightforward. You create the attributes for your activity and the initial content state that will be used to display the content of the activity. And then simply request iOS to start the activity. As you'll see, the content state is always associated with a stale date, and this is because the life cycle of your live activity and the life cycle of your app are two different things, and it's not tied. So your app could actually get killed or crash and not update the activity anymore. So iOS will actually use this stale date to let the user know the data might be outdated at some point. And then easy, create some new content states, send them to the activity using the update method, using an optional alert if you want to wake the device up, and end the activity with a dismissal policy. By default, iOS will let the live activity on your lock screen for 4 hours after it has ended, just so the user can actually see the content of the live activity. So unlike request, the update and the end method can be called in the background. However, that is following iOS's usual restrictions regarding background. So either you'll have a specific background mode, such as a workout session or background auto session, or you'll have to rely on UI background task or the background task framework. But these are actually not very reliable to update something that's really live. And that's why with iOS 17, iOS added the ability to do all of that using remote push notification. But before we do that, let me quickly introduce you to one of the greatest features of Swift, type alias. Because otherwise my presentation is going to get a bit messy. So I've simply type alias the concrete type of my activity with CP activity. So back to remote implementation. Live activities are actually independent from the local regular push notification, So you're not using the regular push notification token in order to start a new activity. Instead, you'll have to use a dedicated push to start token sequence on the activity class and send this token to the server so it can start live activities. This is provisional, so you don't need to ask for content at all, but the user will be able to allow or deny the activity based on the first one you send. So you need to be mindful on this very first live activity. Then actually, each activity has its own update token. This is done that way because you can actually have multiple live activities in parallel for the same app. So on your activity instance, you'll actually have to listen to the push update token sequence and send this push update token to the server. So now that you've seen how to start and update an activity, how do you display it? So in your widget target, you simply create a new widget. It's simply a struct that conforms to the widget protocol, and the body needs to return a widget configuration. Inside, you'll return an activity configuration for your activity attributes type. And alongside, you'll have two view builders. The first one is to display the lock screen UI, and the second one is to display the dynamic island UI. I won't be focusing on the lock screen UI too much because it's just a regular Swift UI view builder with custom modifiers and some limitations such as height, etc. But the dynamic island one is actually a bit more interesting. Here, you'll actually need to return a dynamic island struct, which itself takes 4 different view builders to support the 4 different states of live activities. So on the top screenshot, you'll see the compact implementation with the leading and trailing views. On the second screenshot, actually, it's the minimal presentation when you have 2 different live activities and you're only given one side of the dynamic island. And the last one is the expanded presentation when the user actually taps on your live activity. And this one is actually very interesting as well, because given the shape of the dynamic island, you can't just draw UI as you wish. You have different regions that you can place your UI on. And once you've implemented the lock screen UI and the dynamic island UI, you get all the contexts for free. So you'll get standby mode where your lock screen UI is scaled to 200% and the background is extended to match the device's bounds. You get macOS's mirroring where the compact view is displayed on the menu bar, and if you tap on it, the lock screen UI is displayed. You get CarPlay integration where your lock screen UI will be displayed directly in the car. And you'll also get watchOS integration. By default, you'll get the compact view in your smart stack. And now the fun part. Debugging extension can be a pain, and this one is not an exception. So the first thing you'll need to do is use previews. So the preview macro actually supports previewing widgets in different contexts using different content states with animations and transition between them all. So that's actually fairly useful. You should take advantage of it. But once you've designed your UI and everything works in preview, why isn't it shown on the device? So drop your print statement and use the OS log framework in order to log your debug into macOS's console. Because live activity is a separate process, you'd have to attach Xcode's debugger, and that doesn't always work as you expect to, so macOS console is the way to go. Especially because you can always see the live activities daemon and system daemons related to live activities, so it can help you debug as well. Then you might get throttled because if you send too many requests to update your live activities, some might be dropped. You simply need to add an NS support live activity frequent update key inside your info.plist list so you can test very easily. This actually works in release mode, but however, it's not a given. The user or the system might still decide to throttle it. And the last thing is you'll need to add your live activity widget to your widget bundle. Otherwise, everything will work fine. The activity will start and you'll get no error log at all, but nothing will be displayed, which is probably not what we will want. So just to wrap things up, everything that's happened in real time can be a great candidate for live activities. So either when it's for your whole audience, so like a sport event, or when it's tailored to one specific user, such as catching their flight with their own gate and their own seat and all the information they need to get there on time. There are actually infinite possibilities with live activities. You'll have to watch this one in the App Store. It's pretty funny. But most importantly, most of your app can benefit from live activities in some ways. For instance, if you start a large file upload, it can be interesting to start a live activity so the user can actually understand when it goes back in background that everything is still continuing and happening properly. I've seen Twitter clients starting a 1-minute live activity to cancel the last tweet you've made if you've made a mistake. And there are even some games where, for instance, you could start a live activity at the end of the season for your top players so they can watch the ranking in live and get back in the game if they want. So from a business point of view, it's a great way to keep engaged with your user. Obviously, you get visibility when the user is using another app, when the device is locked and the device is always on. So it's really interesting it really brings value to product. However, you should always keep in mind that unexpected live activities can definitely feel intrusive, and you should always make sure that the user really wants it. Thank you.
Yeah, live activities is an interesting thing. I've definitely seen it in a lot of airline apps because that's definitely a very useful case for it. What has been sort of um, the most unique use of live activities that you've seen?
Yeah, I actually think that the tweet that you can cancel the last tweet you've made, or like the drunken email you sent at 4 a.m. to your boss, that's actually kind of a unique way to use it. And actually, the last slide that I showed, Pixel Pals,
Yeah, Pixel Pals is pretty
it's
cool.
actually a fairly funny app that's based around live activity, where you just got a pet that lives inside your dynamic island. You can just see him play, you can see him sleep. Basically, it does nothing, so it's the best app ever. And that's a funny way to use live activities.
And we have the opposite question. What is the worst use case for live activity that you've seen?
The worst use case for live activities that I've seen, I don't really know right now. I don't have an example on the top of my mind. Sorry. I'll try to think of it and I'll circle back to it. Sorry.
How frequently do live activities update? Because I know widgets sort of update on a regular basis, but not necessarily a predictable basis. How much more frequently do live apps or live activities wind up updating?
So actually, it really depends on what kind of live activities you're doing. If you're doing a local activity, it's really based on how often your app updates it. So it's based on your app background services. So if you use background tasks that as reliable as background tasks,
Mm-hmm.
it can be when the phone is locked, it can be when it's charging. It really depends on it. However, when it's based from the server, actually it's as soon as the server sends the push notification.
Okay, that's
That's
cool.
it.
And is there a way, if two apps are offering a live activity at the same time, for one app to try and get the priority, or for the user even to say which one they would like best?
Not as far as I know. If you have two live activities inside your app, there is a system, a relevance score that you can put one in front of the other. But if two are running at the same time, I don't know if it's the first one that started, or iOS, Apple Intelligence that decides, but you don't have control of it.
So like if you're at the airport, you have to be careful to not have too many apps.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, some might take advantage of it.
Yeah. When do you recommend using like a live activity versus like a widget, just a plain widget?
When actually the live activity, as I said, can be pretty intrusive.
Mhm.
Like it needs to be something that the user really wants to see at a glance. So the phone is on my table and the screen is always on. I can just glimpse at it and see that my task is updating and still going, which is different than a widget that giving me some data at some point in time, which is the weather this afternoon, for instance.
Yeah, so it's like basically more time sensitive things that are
Yeah,
glanceable versus like things where it's like, well, it'd be nice to know what's reasonable
yeah, that's
recent.
it. Yeah, that's it, definitely.
I think you kind of answered this one, but might be worth reiterating since someone asked. So you said you can reuse the current widget extension if you already have one. Shouldn't it be in a separate extension?
Well, it can be, but well, I think it can be, but you can actually just return the live activity in your widget, and iOS kind of knows that it's a live activity, and it will not show the live activity inside your widget offering, I would say. So that's it. You can reuse the same. If you want to split it for, I guess, separation of concerns or stuff like that, you can probably, but not sure it's that interesting.
Cool. That's all I got. Any more?
Same.
Okay. Thank you
you.
so much, Maxime.
Thank you.
Thank you.